Thank you for joining us for our Meet the Author program offered by the Virginia Beach Public Library. Today we welcome local author Mike Shelton. Let me begin by asking you to tell us about your background and how you got started with writing.
Great. First, Chris, thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I'm looking forward to it. We'll see how it works, but this is really a great experience. The slide, talks about kind of the generalities of what happened. I think, one of the things I will say is, you need to have an eye-catching title. In mine, I think, is West Point Admiral. Most people who know anything about the military know that the people who go to West Point go into the Army. They don't go into the Navy. So for somebody to go to West Point and end up as an admiral, that's pretty unusual. And I'm the only one in the history of West Point that ever did it out. I think there's about 80,000 graduates. So that's my eye catcher. And the story in the book is about how all of this happened. One of the things that I grew up as a Navy dependent. My dad was a Master Chief, and he had been in World War II and many of the most important battles. He was at Pearl Harbor. He was at Midway. He was on the task force that took the Doolittle Raiders to attack Japan, and a number of other battles in the Pacific. He never talked about it. First time he ever really talked about what happened with him was when I came back from Vietnam. And he said to me, Mike, you might have a little understanding of what happened and why I feel the way I did. So, when I looked at this, I said, you know what? I need to write something for my descendants, my wife and I's descendants, so that they understand what happened and why, because, here I was a Navy dependent. I went into West Point, then I went into the Navy. How in the hell did that happen? So anyway, that's what this is. This story is about, and the purpose of it was to leave a who and what, how and why of myself and my wife.
All right. I think you've already done this to some extent, but tell us just in general tell us more about your book.
Okay, so it is, as the slide says, it's kind of an autobiography, but it's only the high points. There's a lot of stuff I didn't put in it, and I really concentrate on the leadership and management things that I experienced, and then I kind of crystallize it down into some nuggets that I think some people could read and take something away from it. I need to say at the very outset that this isn't just about me. This is about my wife and I. My wife, Mary, was a Navy nurse who spent over 20 years in the Navy when there were not many women officers, and certainly not many with children. And a lot of what I learned about dealing with women's issues in the military and officers and enlisted were from sharing her experiences about how she was treated and all the things that happened to her. Subsequently, in my career, I was given the assignment to run the CB enlisted assignment branch. The CBs are the troops that I dealt with. They are the construction arm for the Navy, and they support the Marines, basically, and the Army. They do not go on ships by and large. They are on land with the Marines. They are formed up in battalions, a lot like the Army. So the jump from the West Point to the CBs and the Navy engineers is a lot like the Corps of Engineers. So there was a lot of transference in this. But when I did the assignment things, one of the things I was responsible for was integrating women into the CBs, the enlisted women, and the officers. Well, you have to do it the other way. You have to put the officers in first and then the enlisted. So all these experiences from my wife and from what I did led to the integration of women in the Seabees. I commanded a Seabee battalion that had women in it and had all those experiences. And then I integrated them throughout the rest of my career in command. So that's really a lot of the things that happened were staff jobs. I had a lot of experience with uh, what I call Forrest Gump moments, where I met famous people who I remember who had things that were a benefit for me. What's an example of that? Uh, met Rear Admiral John D. Bulkley. Most people don't know who he is. He was the guy who took MacArthur off a Corregidor to escape the Japanese in 1942 when he was a lieutenant junior grade and he had a PT boat. Quite a character. Uh, like he subsequently, later in the war, led the Navy PT boats in the Normandy invasion. Most people don't even know there were PT boats there. Uh,
Mhm.
some really interesting people. I met a retired Marine Brigadier General who was at Belleau Wood in the First World War. So lots of good experiences. I had every kind of job, six CB tours, five major command tours. I was an aide to a three-star submariner, lots of staff and command jobs. So I pretty much had a lot of the things that would give you good ideas and bad ideas about leadership. Um, we went all around the world, overseas, that kind of thing. I'm trying to think if there's any other things I want to pop in here. Um, but I think the really significant things were a spectrum of jobs at all levels, observing good and bad leadership. But in the middle of all this, my love was the Seabees. I loved being with the troops. It was great. We did lots of great things, and the book talks about these things. Not me, talks about the things that the people in the Seabee battalions did in Vietnam and other places. Uh, all life-altering experiences. Uh, I think the experience in Vietnam, as I mentioned earlier, when I was involved in the Tet Offensive, which was the biggest battle of the whole war, saw combat there and uh, learned what war was really all about. And that was kind of a benchmark for the rest of my career. So that's what the book's about. It is kind of an autobiography, but it is also a tutorial on management and leadership.
All right. Is writing your primary career?
No, it is not. You see, I was in the Navy for all this time. When I retired from the Navy after 34 years, I was hired first to run a facilities management company in the private sector, a privately owned, family owned company. And I worked for them for 3 or 4 years. And
Mhm.
then I was hired by a publicly traded major company, a company called MCOR, which at the time was $6 billion mechanical electrical specialty contractor, the largest in the United States. And they hired me to run their government contracting uh, subsidiary, which they were just going into. They didn't really have much. And I spent about 10 years building that up until I retired. So that was taking all my main time. But during that time, I decided that I was really wanted to write something for my kids to understand how all of these things happened. So I started putting together a notebook and writing down things as I thought of them that I thought were important. And that was the beginning of this, but it certainly wasn't a primary uh, career.
All right. Are you self-published or do you have a publisher?
No, I am not self-published. I was published by Acclaim Press, which is a small publisher in Missouri. Um, I would just say, and it's hard not to be too more than negative on this. The publishing thing I knew nothing about, and it was kind of a eye-opening experience. The publishers control everything. It is difficult to get published, particularly a first book when you have no background.
Mhm.
And uh, it's hard to even get people to look at your book, your book or your draft manuscript. Very difficult. Anyway, after a lot of frustrations, I finally got a publisher. And the good news there, having the publisher, where I found that uh, he had a really good craft. They put together to me a really excellent book. The proofreading was at a different level and from a different direction than my editor did, and that was good. Putting together all the photos, I put a lot of photos in the book from my career, my dad's career, because I talked about his experiences, say at Pearl Harbor and Midway and other places like that in World War II.
Mhm.
And so he put all this stuff together, and I thought did an excellent job. And he made sure that the jargon or the service speak that people use, without thinking, he found all of that. He made it so that people could understand what I was talking about. That was all good. The cons were that the publisher exerts excessive control. I can't emphasize that enough. The publisher is the one that determines the fate of the book. They decide what's going to be in the book, uh, what the price is going to be, what kind of book is it going to be, a hardback, paperback, whatever, what all the marketing issues are going to be. And we have to understand, they're in the business to make money, not lose money. So their primary concern is how to get to sell enough books to pay for their investment. And that makes the contracts very difficult. I work with contracts as an engineer in the Navy and then in my subsequent job all my life. And I knew what a contract was. And it took about 5 rounds to finally get this thing something we both could do. I mean, we did it, we finally did it. But what I would emphasize to anybody is you need to understand what you're getting into and make sure, as I did, that you have a lawyer go over the contract and make sure you know what you're signing up for.
All right. How do you promote your work?
Well, it's interesting. That's another part two of the publishing thing. Uh, what I found, at least with my publisher, was once the book was published, it's almost like uh, I was abandoned. Not quite, but I got a lot of promises about what they were going to do to market stuff, but really that mostly didn't happen. It was up to me, and I did a lot of things you would obviously think. I tried to get it. The thing you really need to do is you need to get it reviewed. Now I had some people review it, and I have some very good endorsements in my book from people that I knew that were very good. But you need reviews from the media. You need magazines and newspapers and all that. And there was another big surprise how very difficult it is to get reviewers to read your book. Read your book. I mean, you're providing them a free copies and anything. It's still very difficult to get people to do it. The same is true for newspapers. The newspaper sections and book sections in there. Those editors have their prejudice, what they like, what they don't like. And you go to some of the bigger ones, they don't like the military, they don't like this, they don't like that. So I found it very frustrating to try to get uh, you know reviews done, which is and then they would put it in their publication, magazine, or whatever. I had some of those, but I had a lot of that were disappointing. I did get it. The one thing the editor did do is he did get it. I mean, the publisher did get it accepted by Amazon and Barnes and Noble, so it's on their web pages. So that was good, but you don't make any money off of that. They take all the money.
Yes.
And I did have a direct mail campaign that was of some value. But the major thing that I've been doing is I do give speaking engagements, that are followed by book signings, and veterans groups, alumni groups, people that are interested in the area, those kind of things. Uh, and it's word of mouth and all that. But that's primarily how I did it.
All right. You have gone over this quite a bit, I think, but where do you get ideas for your books?
Well, I think most authors, frankly, I think they get their ideas from their life experiences.
Sure.
Some of it is, in my case, like a catharsis of things that happened to me that I just needed to get off my chest and talk about. Because, everybody's influenced by what happened to them. Uh, I had one mentor tell me one time, it's better to be lucky than good. And I am the prime example of that. There are many places in my career where if something had gone a little bit different, it would have never had the ending I wanted it to have. But the point of it was, it did, and I needed to talk about that so that people would understand that. Um, so the main thing is your life experiences and what interests you. Now, I've got a second book that I'm working on. This book is more historically inclined because I experienced all these things in the military, and I kept saying, "Why did this happen?" These are things at the national level, political things. Why is this country doing this? You know, so I've done a lot of reading, and so this book that I'm going to do is I am doing is kind of about that. It's as I said, it's going to explore why things happened in my lifetime that I witnessed, and it requires, as it says on the slide, understanding the motivation of the political commentators, politicians, academia, and people who participated, because everybody is going to record it the way they want it, not necessarily the way it was. So I
Yes.
think that's a good idea for a book.
All right. Tell us a little about your writing process.
Well, I think like a lot of people, I mentioned a little earlier, uh, when I first decided, this is 10, 15 years ago, that I thought I wanted to write a book about how all these things happened, I decided that, like everybody else, you get brilliant thoughts, but if you don't write them down, you forget them. You just don't recall them. So I started writing in a notebook, not a lot, 2 or 3 lines when I thought about something, about why something happened or something that I heard later that related to that. So that I started putting that together. I read a lot of things that were related to this, and I ended up putting them all down, and then that became a basis for an outline that I fleshed in, and kind of throughout the process. I think you need to take breaks and reflect on where you are, what you did, where you still think you're going, those kind of things, as it says in the slide, and then make corrections. So that's what I did. When I finally had a review, I had a manuscript and was ready for it to be reviewed. I went out to some very uh, good reviewers, I would say, people that I had known in my careers, and who had that I really respected their opinions, and one of which is uh, an admiral named Vern Clark, who was the chief of naval operations. Uh, Obviously, a pretty heavy dude.
Hmm.
He and I were lieutenant commanders together and aides together on the Pentagon E-wing staff. So I knew him from the time we were both lieutenant commanders, and he graciously uh, offered to review my manuscript. And he really worked big time on. I was really surprised. He made it much better because he could provide stuff that I didn't know. So anyway, my point is, you got to have somebody like that look at your book, and then I was ready to get it published. One of the things I say at kind of the end, and it's very true, you fall in love with what you wrote, and you think every word is great. Two things happen. first my editor said, this book is way too long, and he cut over probably about 40% of my manuscript. He says, we're
Mhm.
not going to talk about any of that. That's everything that happened to you after you left the Navy. There's lots of books about the corporate world. You don't need to write about that. Write about what you really did. So did that. That was hard. That was an emotional issue. Um, and then the other thing is you write some things and you think, wow, this is just great. I've said everything I really want, and the editor chops it out. No, that wasn't any good. So it's what I say is you have to realize going into this process that some of the things that you think are your finest writing are going to end up on the floor. So get over it.
All right. You had mentioned Amazon and Barnes and Noble as being places that people could buy your book. Are they available any other places?
Well, those are the website, those and my website, I think are the primary ones. As I said there, I have a website, it has a word form on it, and I give a discount. You got the discount word there,
Mhm.
15% off. Uh, Amazon and Barnes and Noble and them, they charge whatever they want to charge for it. It depends on what their stock is and what they want to get rid of it or whatever. So, but it's not, I'm my next thing, which I haven't really got to yet, is going to some of the independent bookstores and
Mhm.
see if they want to do it on a consignment basis. Just put them out, offer to do a book signing for them and all that kind of thing.
Yes.
But as I said, you try to get it, try to get advertisements and stuff. But what I found is that's very difficult.
Right. What is a piece of advice that you would give to an aspiring writer?
I think the number one thing, and this gets to my point about seeing some of your what you think is your best stuff hit the floor and all these other things and the difficulty in getting published and all that. I think you should really write for your own enjoyment. That's what I did. I needed for my own good to get my wife and I's story out there. What did we go through? What were the times like? We I was there when the advent of women coming into the Navy in massive numbers, all of the diversity and all that, all those issues were coming over the time that I came in. You have to remember when I came in the military, there was a draft, there was a war in Vietnam, all these other things. I experienced all those things. My wife experienced them. So, I had a need to say what I thought about that and what I learned from that and whatever. And so for me, there was a lot of self-satisfaction, uh, and that was the great reward of seeing my work in print. Uh, I think a big mistake that people can make is thinking that they're going into this to make a lot of money. Good luck. I don't think anybody makes a lot of money except these, the people like Harry, who had his book ghostwritten, I'm sure. Uh, People want to read that kind of stuff, but I think most books are not like that. So anyway, back, the main point is write for your own enjoyment and be happy with what you get out of it.
All right. Will you read us an excerpt from your book?
I will do that. Let me just pull it up here. I just kind of took this at random, so uh, the first chapter is called Metamorphosis in the Gray Womb. The Gray Womb is West Point. That's what the cadets call it. And my quote is, uh, "Metamorphosis is the most profound of all acts." And that's from Catherine Lynn Valente in The Night Garden. Many cultures have rituals to mark the passage from child to adult. The military culture is no exception. Starting at the bottom of an organization and learning what it is like to have no power and few rights has always been important in the acculturation of military personnel. To lead, it is necessary to understand what it is like to be required to obey orders from a position that requires unquestioning obedience. A favorite story of mine is my father's story of his days in the quote old Navy unquote when he was about his job in the old Navy about his job as the lowest ranking enlisted man on a battleship. His task was to clean and polish the, the spittoons on the ship. No small job. It was gross, it was unpleasant, and it taught him the meaning of being at the bottom of the military organization, as well as the importance of seniority and advancement. Likewise, my plebe or first year at West Point was designed to teach the important lessons that my father had learned as the lowest ranking sailor on a battleship. That is, what it's like to be at the bottom and yet held to the highest standards with little or no opportunity to protest or change one's lot. Those who have never had this experience of being on the bottom of such a power structure are not likely to understand what it means and the ramifications of directing people to do things they have not done themselves.
All right. Thank you, Mike, for sharing that with us. Do you have anything else to add?
Just that I really appreciate this, Chris. This has been a great experience. I hope that people enjoy it and perhaps might even be interested in enjoying the book. Thank you very much.
You are welcome. I appreciate you joining me today. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I wish you the best of luck with your new book.
Thanks.